Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Bismillahi awwaluhu wa akhiruhu. We begin with Allah's blessed name again, and we thank Him for this opportunity, and we thank you, Islamic Broadcasting Network, for giving us this chance to address you. We're still waiting for David to come, but he made some very important comments last time, and I want to remind you of what he spoke about. He spoke about the world market today, the world economy, as a casino market and a casino economy. Namely, it's a big gambling den. That's what it is. He spoke about speculative transactions. Majority of transactions today in the world market and the world economy is speculative transactions. And so money is not going towards productive activity. Money is going in search of more money. And this is a manifest corruption of the market. I attempted to direct him towards one of the causes of the corruption of the market today, and that was the fake money that we're now using. I called it fictitious money. They call it fiat money, but the real term should be fake money. And that is, they create money out of nothing. Only Allah, the Lord God, only He can create wealth out of nothing. We cannot do that. For us, Allah says, وَأَلَيْسَ لِلْإِنسَانِ إِلَّا مَا سَعَى. If you want to reap, you have to plant. The only people who can reap without planting are the banks. Yes, they can reap without planting. Why? Not because they are the Lord God. Why? Answer, they are reaping what others are planting. That is the banking system. So one of the causes of this corruption of the market today around the world is fake money. Money being created out of nothing. They call it fiat money. And they have used this monetary system of fake money to enrich themselves. And they take the fake money to buy free of charge, buy all the oil they want to buy free of charge, buy all the natural products they produce of the rest of the world free of charge, because they're producing the money out of nothing. But we now have to use their money to be able to buy and to sell. And when to use their money, we have to give them our real stuff, real goods. And so they are benefiting from this monetary system and becoming richer and richer, while the rest of us are sunk in growing poverty. And now we said it's not only the fake money that is causing the disruption of the economy. It is also, they take the fake money and then they lend it to us on interest, which is a double whammy. And every scripture which has come from Allah, every book which has come from Allah, has prohibited usury, prohibited money being lent on interest. And the very last revelation to come down in the Quran, the very last one, was a revelation in which Allah did not speak about shirk, He didn't speak about tawheed, He didn't speak about fasting, He didn't speak about charity, He spoke about riba. That is the last revelation in the Quran. And in that revelation, He declared war on the moneylender. وَإِن لَمْ تَفْعَلُوا, if you do not give up lending money on interest, if you do not give up riba, فَأَذَنُوا بِحَرْبٍ مِّنَ اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ, then take notice of a declaration of war from Allah and from His Messenger. This is the last revelation. And our Prophet, Allah's blessings be upon him, spoke so harshly. He cursed. That's right. He cursed all four. He cursed the one who takes riba, meaning you put your money in a fixed deposit and you're taking the interest. Prophet Muhammad ﷺ cursed you. And if you are the owner of the bank, or if you are a director on the bank, you got more to face on Judgment Day. Oh yes, they're living in a dream world. And then he cursed the one who gives the riba. That's right, yes. If you take a loan on interest and you're paying the interest, Prophet Muhammad ﷺ has cursed you. And if you have the curse of a prophet upon you, and you make dua, will Allah answer your dua? Which airline did you take to come from the moon? You're living in a dream world. If you have the curse of the Prophet upon you and you perform your fasting in Ramadan, will that be accepted by Allah? Wake up from your dream world. So he cursed the one who gives the riba. He cursed the one who takes the riba. He cursed the one who records the transaction. And he cursed the two witnesses. And he said they're all equally guilty. That's right. And every book which has come from Allah has prohibited this usury or riba. And today, the entire economy around the world is riddled with riba. The result of this is that money no longer circulates through the economy. When money is lent on interest, I don't have the time today to give a lecture on this subject, but I have lectured in the past on the subject, so you can go to my lectures and you can study it. When money is lent on interest and riba takes grip of the economy, then the implication of the result will be that money will no longer circulate through the economy. And so the rich will now remain forever rich, forever and ever and ever. And the poor will remain imprisoned in permanent poverty forever and ever and ever. But our Darul Uloom don't seem to be bothered about that. They don't teach the subject of riba. All our Maulanas and Shuyukh and scholars, distinguished and learned Islamic scholars, and they will never go on the mimbar to lecture on the subject. They do not have the capacity, they don't have the competence, they don't have the courage to teach the subject of riba. And yet it is so simple. When an economy is based on riba, wealth will no longer circulate through the economy. The rich will now remain forever rich. And Allah says in the Quran that He has instituted these laws كَيْ لَا يَكُونَ الدُّولَةَ بَيْنَ الْأَغْنِيَاءِ مِنْكُمْ كَيْ لَا يَكُونَ الدُّولَةَ بَيْنَ الْأَغْنِيَاءِ مِنْكُمْ, so that wealth should not remain permanently circulating only amongst the wealthy. Rather, wealth must circulate through the economy. The Christian world today has abandoned the prohibition of riba. The Hindu world today has forgotten the prohibition of riba, of usury, of money being lent on interest. The Jewish world the Jews have become the money lenders of the world. That's what they are today. They can't be annoyed with me for speaking the truth. They have become the money lenders of the world. And this is why when William Shakespeare wrote The Merchant of Venice, he gave us Shylock, the Jewish moneylender, in that book, that play. And the governments of the world of Islam today either do not have the knowledge or they don't have the courage to stand up to the subject of riba. And the world of Islamic scholarship eats biryani and go home and sleep. That's what we have today. And the few of us, the very few of us, who are standing up, mashallah, 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 we have amongst us. We have the Murabitun. Mashallah, the Murabitun has been very firm on riba. Those of us who have been standing up and teaching the subject of riba, we are ostracized. No, 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 ban him. You must close the doors of the masjid on him. See what Allah will do with you. You close the doors of the masjid to me today, Allah will close the doors of the masjid for you tomorrow. How do we respond? How do we respond to this state of affairs? David said that it's a casino economy. He's correct. He says it's a casino market. It's correct. He spoke of speculative transactions all over the world. How do we respond? The response should be that which will allow wealth to circulate once again through the economy, so that the rich don't remain permanently rich and the poor are not imprisoned in permanent poverty. Did you hear that? That is the way to respond. So then what are the steps which must be taken to respond to this corrupted economy? What should we do? The socialist economy, the socialist way of thinking, which has come from Karl Marx and some others, they say that you must have state intervention in the economy. David is here in time. Come, David. Yeah. The socialist economy is that you must have state intervention. Welcome, David. Welcome. Have a seat. We're talking about, David, an economy in which, as you rightly pointed out last week, you have a big casino. You said it's a casino market. You said it's a casino economy. And you spoke about the prevalence of speculative transactions, gambling.
Yes.
And this distortion of the economy, you said money is not going towards productive means.
That's right.
Money is only searching for more money. And this is distorting the economy. We spoke yesterday about, I called it fictitious money. They called it fiat money, where you can create money out of nothing. And we say this is a further corruption of the economy and the market. The one thing we did not do, and I was just explaining that to the gathering audience, is usury, where money is used to make more money without any productive activity. And we say that when an economy is based on usury, then wealth will no longer circulate through the economy. The rich will remain forever rich, ever and ever and ever, and the poor will be imprisoned in permanent poverty. But that's not the whole story. The rich keep on getting richer and the poor getting permanent poverty. What was the name of that man who wrote
Persistent Poverty.
What was his name? Beckford?
George Beckford, Jamaican economist.
A Jamaican economist,
yes,
yeah.
One of the Plantation School of Economics.
Yeah, my audience out there has many very bright students, and every time we mention the name of a book, they go and search for it. So George Beckford, Persistent
Poverty.
Good. So David, we have a little time left.
Yes, so there's some work on the highway being done just now.
Oh, okay.
So the traffic just backed up for 15 minutes.
My, yes.
They're putting on an overpass or walkover, so my apologies. Yes.
So we have to now, we say, usury, the Christians have forgotten it. Usury, the Hindus have forgotten it. Usury, money being lent on the interest, and there is no falsehood at all. It is absolute truth. The Jews have become the money lenders of the world. They can't be annoyed with me for that statement. And insofar as the world of Islam is concerned, our governments either don't know the subject or they lack the backbone to deal with the subject. And so what do? How do we respond? And when you came in, I was saying one of the responses has been, if we no longer have such an economy and the poor are suffering, then there's a socialist thinking, and that is you must have state intervention in the economy to help the downtrodden. But our Islamic response is different. We say, in order to restore a healthy economy in which wealth will circulate through the economy, you need to restore the free and the fair market. David, over to you.
Well, thank you. And it's a very important discussion. And these discussions are taking place globally with the crisis that is going on now. Some time ago, we developed, out of experience of others, the idea of the social economy, or the social solidarity economy. The ILO, International Labour Organization, actually does refer to it. And there are a number of people in Canada and elsewhere that developed the notion of cooperative activity. So you have financial cooperatives like the credit unions, then providing capital to small business people, organizing themselves in cooperatives, often workers who are displaced, retrenched, lose their jobs and so on, forming a business and then providing goods and services, and therefore transferring wealth, if you wish, into the communities. And that's an important dimension, because yes, you need government intervention critically. It's interesting that I'm not sure if I'm right, but I saw it somewhere that Boris Johnson government in the UK had to partly take over ownership of the railway system, which had been privatized in the Thatcher years. And I saw this morning Virgin Atlantic, and Branson, who's supposed to be this wonderful capitalist, innovator, champion, and so on, he's now seeking a bailout for Virgin Atlantic. Who's he going to get the bailout from? The state. So in 2008, 2009, in the United States and elsewhere, the state bailed out banks, they bailed out General Motors in the US, one of the biggest corporations in the world, and took ownership by way of shares and so on in return for the financial injection. So in moments of crisis, all that fictitious money, all that casino gambling, they then, when they're in crisis, turn to the state for support, and they get bailed out. The question then is, what does the state do with those assets that they may acquire in this moment of crisis? Do they then simply return the shares to the private owners in return for the money that they put in for the bailout, so it goes back into the same cycle again? Or is there some kind of social ownership model that gets created? Because our experience has been that state ownership by itself, while it is a necessary condition for broad-based ownership of assets and wealth and natural resources, is not a sufficient means, because you have a few elites who, because of their position in the bureaucracy, the technocracy, in the political corridors of power and so on, end up operating those state enterprises as if they were private owners. And through mechanisms of corruption, enrich themselves out of state assets as well, through the award of contracts and so on. So what we also have to ensure is that we have, as the people, citizens who own the natural assets of the country, and therefore the natural wealth of the country, that there's a certain control of the decision making, and also that the wealth that is generated from those assets benefits the entire society in a fair way. And the Constitution of Trinidad and Tobago, in the preamble, very interestingly, sets that out, because in our Constitution, in the preamble, it says that we, the people of Trinidad and Tobago, affirm our belief in the principles of social justice, that the resources should be organized to subserve the common good. Well, that's a strong statement. Not the good of a few, but the common good. But so that notion of social justice, of a fairness and equity, of the benefits of the resources and wealth of a nation, is there in our constitution. But how our economy actually works is not going to achieve that noble objective in the constitution.
Let us turn to the market.
Yes.
We insist on a free and a fair market. I'll come back to that in a moment. My question to you is, are all the resources of a people, of a country, are all these a part of the market for buying and selling? Or is it possible that there are those things which belong to the country, belong to the people, like, for example, oil, which should not be in the market?
Yes, I think that we have to make a distinction that there are some, what used to be called many years ago, but it's gone out of style, the commanding heights of the economy. You remember the third five-year development plan of the Williams government, 1968 to 73, spoke about control, ownership and control of the commanding heights of the economy. So key resources, oil and gas, ought to not be purely market-driven.
Okay.
Yes. Now,
the ownership.
No ownership. Although there are challenges, real challenges that we may have in terms of having 100% ownership, because 100% ownership of the oil and gas resources in a country like Trinidad and Tobago means that you then have to have the capital to keep reinvesting in the industry to generate production because of the nature, the very expensive nature of searching for oil, exploring for oil and producing oil and gas and going downstream. So there may be some other kinds of arrangements that you may have to have, but including very strong tax regimes to ensure that the people get their fair share of those assets if you cannot have 100% ownership. And those are things that each country has to work out at different points in time.
Leave oil, take water.
Certainly. Water, in my view, water is a human right. It should never be a commodity.
There you are.
Never be a commodity.
Right.
It's a human right because we cannot live without water. Mm-hmm. And it is really awful where we now have gotten into this culture of bottled water, when the water that we could get from the tap, certainly in our country, is good enough to drink. Some countries maybe not, but certainly in our country. But water is a basic human right, and it should be enshrined as such in the constitution of the country, as a basic human right.
In many parts of Africa, you don't buy and sell milk. No, milk is the common property of everybody.
Well, yes, and you know, I'm sure that there are other things that we could identify as such. You know, now, electricity, for example, is not at the same level as water as a base, because you could live without electricity. But certainly the generation and transmission and distribution of electricity, because it is so necessary for modern life, ought to be something that is made available through state ownership and control to the population, so that those who have less income are not deprived of electricity. And I think we could add some others as well.
Right. I think we're now on the same wavelength, that yes, there's a free and a fair market.
Yes.
But not all things are in the market. There are some things which have to be kept out of the market.
Yes.
And they're the common property of the people.
Yes.
Good?
And just one other small point, and that is that the market, when you say free and fair, that's a very important defining of the market.
Are we coming to that?
Okay, because the market is, in many cases, is not free and fair. And what has been happening over the years with so-called deregulation and with the liberalization of the economy, the theory was that there were going to be many more producers and therefore a freer market, and therefore the consumers would benefit. What has in fact happened is that in many areas of the, of the economy, or the production of goods and services, there's been a concentration of ownership rather than a liberalization.
Okay.
And therefore, what you have in some cases is maybe not a monopoly, but what economists call a monopsony, where you have
Okay.
a few very large people
Yeah.
determining how the market operates.
We're going to have,
Yes.
I'm building the foundation now for another session.
Yes, and yes.
Yeah, I'm building the foundation for another session.
And let's hope that I don't get held up by highway problems.
Yes. Another session where we'll be able to advise our people, look, this cannot be in the market to be bought and sold, private ownership. That cannot be, that cannot be. And you must resist, even if you have to wage war, you must resist the ownership of resources which should not be in the market. Okay?
Yes, yes.
So that those who want to put a rope around our neck and enslave us, we may resist them. Okay. And if now we want to ensure that the market remains a free and a fair market, what do we do with hoarding? What do we do with monopoly? What do we do with fake money? What do we do with money being lent on interest and so on? What do we do with insider trading and so on? What do we do when people have money and they want to invest it, they don't have the business acumen? And therefore you have the stock market, what we call modaraba, where they say sleeping partnership. You have the business, I have the money. We bring them together. We want to ensure that the business is operating honestly, truthfully, so I get my share, you get your share. I'm building the foundation for the next, another session, yeah. But because I've been waiting a long time, David, for someone who can explain to me. And you are here, and mashallah, I want to tell the audience out here, I find, I don't like to say this in his face, but David is the best politician that we have here in the country at this time. The best politician, the man with the greatest integrity and more knowledge than the others have and more backbone. This is why you will find the marginalization of those who are truly our precious thinkers and scholars. When we go back now to the beginning of this country and the birth of the People's National Movement and the coming of Dr. Eric Williams, and you said you can't understand why Dr. Williams did not make an alliance with Butler, because Butler was already there fighting slavery. And this is the man who wrote Capitalism and Slavery. But the PNM shunned him. They simply honored him by naming a highway after him. But there was a political separation between Williams and Butler. Williams did accept C.L.R. James, and they worked together for a while, but then after that they broke up. And I want you to put some light on this subject, David. You're one of those people because you knew C.L.R. James.
Yes.
What was the fundamental difference between the two men, and what was it that caused the break?
It was fundamentally political in the sense that James had a different conception of what the party should be. And when the split came over, I think, trumped-up allegations against James and his wife, Selma, who's still alive, actually, in England, over the management of the Nation newspaper.
Oh.
And so there were resolutions that were brought to a PNM convention, perhaps in 1961. That the exact date is slipping right now, or very early on. This would be before independence, and the resolutions were attacking James and his wife over the management of the Nation newspaper. And there were scurrilous allegations and false that they were trumped up to get James out. And Williams knew about it. Williams was Williams would have been part of it. He may not have led it. In fact, I think A.N.R. Robinson was one of those who led the assault against James. Yes. But James then wrote a very important book initially called P&M Go Forth, but later became Party Politics in the West Indies.
Party politics in the West Indies.
And in that book, he had a scathing critique. He made a scathing critique of the West Indian middle classes.
Mm-hmm.
And he said the West Indian middle classes have essentially betrayed the workers' movement, that labor movement, and the ideals of the 1930s, because the West Indian middle classes have sold themselves to the interests of the elite,
Okay.
both the colonial elite. So, I mean, one of the things that James had a very acerbic tongue, wry sense of humor, loved to laugh and make jokes and so on,
Yeah.
very wry sense of humor. But one of the phrases that one of the sentences that he wrote in that book that stuck in my mind, he said that, you know, these West Indian middle classes would do anything to get an invitation to the governor's house, because we're still a colony, yes? And so
I love him. I love him.
So, you know, they would trip up over themselves and
I love seeing our James.
and basically suck up to the governor, you know, to get an invitation to the governor. And so they disconnected themselves from the very social milieu from which they came.
Okay.
Because they would have emerged from the working people. Yes, because we talk about the 1950s, where the middle classes were relatively small. The educated middle classes were relatively small. And so what he also said is that they don't understand the real economy because they're not involved in the real economy. And they don't therefore have any ideas of their own. He was very scathing. Don't have any ideas of their own, which means therefore that they adopted the ideas of others.
That's the middle class. I want to know
Yes.
about the two men. The
so
difference in
he
economic
saw
philosophy.
he therefore saw Williams as the epitome as a representative of that middle class.
Oh.
That is essentially what it
Okay.
came down to.
Okay, but what about philosophy, economic philosophy?
Well, yeah. At a later point, what then happened was that Williams adopted the Arthur Lewis economic theory of industrialization by invitation, which was that we had a surplus of labor, and I'm kind of simplifying it, and some people probably say giving it not a fair critique, but we had a surplus of labor, primarily labor in the, and as we was talking about the West Indies in general, not just Trinidad, but generally, surplus of labor primarily involved in agricultural activity, which was relatively low value added, and that we needed to move towards manufacturing and other aspects of economic activity where there be greater value added, but that we did not have the technology or the capital or the marketing and so on to experience, because we had no tradition of manufacturing, and therefore we needed to bring in foreign capital, provide them with incentives, enable them to establish these manufacturing businesses so that labor could move from low wage, low productivity in agriculture, estate agriculture, primarily sugar, into factory work, which would be better paid, higher skilled, higher valued labor and so on. And that we would also develop the technology and the management and so on over a period of time to be able to run these industries ourselves. So there were some other things, of course. I'm simplifying Arthur Lewis tremendously. So Williams was going in that direction economically, which therefore meant that we had to provide investment incentives to foreign capital, the pioneer industries legislation, where foreign companies primarily got 10, 15-year tax holidays and so on to set up these factories. Many of them came, and then after 10, 15 years, they packed up
And left.
or went to another island and got another 10, 15 years. Yes.
Okay.
So James would have been critical of that. And then, of course, in the early 60s, in 1963, Williams established the Mbanifold Commission of Inquiry into subversive activities in the trade union movement. I think I mentioned that in an earlier program.
Okay.
And then in 1965, during a strike by sugar workers, interestingly, not against the foreign...
We have 1 minute.
1 minute. Not against the company, but the sugar workers went on strike against Badisaga Miraj, the union leader.
Oh, okay.
And went to George Weeks for solidarity and support.
Okay.
And during that period, Williams declared a state of emergency.
Okay.
James happened to be in Trinidad covering cricket, England playing West Indies for the Guardian newspaper in England. He was staying in Barataria, and the state of emergency was in the sugar belt and in Barataria, so that James could be put under house arrest.
Look at that. We're going to have to stop because we run out of time.
Yes.
But today I've got the beginning. I've been longing a long, long time now for someone to teach me this subject, and I'm grateful to you. David, we are hoping that we'll be able to get a program next week, Sunday, if I get permission to travel to come to IBN. But if we do get the permission for an hour and a half, we're going to have a live streaming. And we'll open the lines for you wherever you are in the world. You'll be able to call in from anywhere in the world you are. There's a telephone number at the bottom of the screen. Please put it there, IBN number. Please put it at the bottom of the screen. You'll be able to call in from wherever you are in the world. And it will live stream. And we will be able to talk about the virus and the implications of the virus. There's the bottom of the screen, that's the number. You can call from wherever in the world you are. I'm going to try to get some earphones so I can hear clearly what you're saying. And we'll be able to discuss the immense problems which have arisen around the world in consequence of this manufactured virus. Thank you. Wassalamu alaikum. Thank you, David.
Thank you.